You sit in front of a screen, scrolling through lives that glisten like gold. Private jets, marble estates, champagne towers that never run dry. They smile at you from magazine covers, their teeth impossibly white, their words impossibly smooth. Anyone can make it, they whisper. Work hard, dream big, believe. And you do believe, because the alternative, that you've been played like a chess piece on a board you never saw, is too painful to accept. But what if I told you that every word dripping from their lips is a carefully crafted lie? Not the obvious kind, not the clumsy deception of a common thief. No, this is the ancient art of manipulation, refined over centuries in the blood-soaked corridors of power. The rich don't just lie to you, they architect entire realities, weaving illusions so elegant that you defend them even as they tighten the chains around your wrists. Florence, 1513. A disgraced diplomat sits in exile, his career shattered, his name mud. Yet in that darkness, Niccolo Machiavelli pens words that will echo through 5 centuries. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. He understood what the masses never would, that power doesn't belong to the truthful. It belongs to those who control the story. And the rich? They've mastered this game beyond even Machiavelli's wildest dreams. Here's what they won't tell you on their motivational stages, in their best-selling books, in their TED Talks that rake in millions of views. The system isn't broken. It's working exactly as designed. And you're the fuel that keeps it burning. But knowledge is insurgency. Understanding is revolution. And if you're ready to see behind the velvet curtain, to learn the laws that govern the invisible kingdom of wealth and power, then prove it. Type the words "I rise" in the comments below. Not because I need your validation, but because that simple act separates those who merely consume from those who truly hunger for awakening. The rabbit hole goes deep, my friend, deeper than the sanitized history they taught you in school, deeper than the success stories packaged and sold like Happy Meals. We're about to walk through palaces built on deception, through boardrooms where destinies are traded like commodities, through the architecture of illusion that keeps billions sedated and compliant. The rich lie because they must, because truth is the enemy of empire, because the moment you understand how the game really works, you become dangerous. So decide now. Will you continue to be the audience, applauding as your pockets are picked? Or will you become the one who knows? The choice was always yours. They just convinced you it wasn't. Welcome to the secret theater of power. The performance is about to begin. Before Silicon Valley billionaires tweeted their way into your psyche, before Wall Street wolves hunted in glass towers, there were the original architects of grand deception. Men who understood that kingdoms aren't built on truth, they're built on the perception of truth. And that difference? It's everything. In the labyrinthine courts of Renaissance Italy, power was liquid, flowing from one family to another with the swiftness of poisoned wine. The Medicis didn't just accumulate wealth, they rewrote reality itself. They commissioned art that glorified their name, funded scholars who penned their legacy, manipulated the very church that claimed to speak for God. When you walked through Florence, every statue, every fresco, every architectural marvel whispered the same message. The Medicis are inevitable. The Medicis are divine. Resistance is futile. Niccolo Machiavelli watched this theater of power from the shadows. He saw princes fall not because they were weak, but because they were honest. He witnessed the ruthless thrive while the virtuous bled out in forgotten dungeons. And he understood the terrible truth that morality professors still refuse to teach. In the game of power, ethics is a luxury of the already defeated. Cross the Mediterranean, and you find Ibn Khaldun in 14th century North Africa, documenting the rise and fall of dynasties with the precision of a surgeon. He identified the pattern. Every empire begins with a hungry generation that fights for survival, builds with their bare hands, knows the taste of blood and sweat. But within 3 generations, their descendants become soft, drunk on inherited wealth, convinced of their own superiority. They forget that power must be fed, maintained, defended. They start to believe their own propaganda. And that's when the cycle breaks. That's when the empire crumbles from within, ripe for the next hungry generation to devour. Move east to China, where Sun Tzu inscribed wisdom that modern CEOs plagiarize without comprehension. All warfare is based on deception. He wasn't just talking about battlefield tactics. He was revealing the fundamental law of power, that the greatest victories are won before the first sword is drawn. You defeat your enemy not by being stronger, but by making them believe you're invincible. You conquer not through force, but through the manipulation of perception. These weren't moral philosophers debating ethics over wine. These were men who understood power in its rawest form. They saw through the decorative lies that societies tell themselves about justice, fairness, meritocracy. They recognized that beneath every civilization's noble proclamations lurks the same brutal machinery. Those who understand how power really works, and those who are crushed by it. And the rich today? They're the heirs to this ancient knowledge. They've simply updated the weapons. Instead of palace intrigue, they have PR firms. Instead of court historians, they have media empires. Instead of royal decrees, they have algorithms that shape what you see, think, and believe. The game hasn't changed, only the costumes. Make them believe the door is open while you barricade it from the inside. The most brilliant deception the wealthy ever orchestrated wasn't hiding their privilege, it was flaunting it while calling it achievable. They turned inequality into aspiration. They transformed your exclusion into your motivation, and you thank them for it. Walk into any airport bookstore and you'll find them, rows upon rows of books written by billionaires, their faces radiating that peculiar glow of the obscenely successful. My Journey to Success, The 10 Habits That Made Me Rich, From Nothing to Everything. They cost $29.99 and millions buy them, desperate for the secret formula. But here's what Machiavelli would tell you. The real secrets aren't in those pages. The actual mechanisms of their wealth, the inherited connections, the insider information, the systemic advantages, those remain locked behind smiles and motivational speeches. Consider the tech mogul who loves to tell the story of starting his company in a garage. Inspiring, isn't it? Except he conveniently forgets to mention the $300,000 investment from his parents, the Ivy League computer science degree, the network of venture capitalists his family knew personally. These aren't small details, they're the entire foundation. But admitting that would shatter the illusion. It would reveal that the game is rigged before you even learn the rules. Napoleon understood this principle intimately. When he crowned himself emperor, he didn't just seize power, he created an entirely new mythology. He commissioned paintings showing him as a godlike figure, calm amid chaos, touching plague victims without fear, crossing impossible Alps on a rearing stallion. The reality? He crossed the Alps on a mule. He was terrified of plague victims. But reality doesn't build empires, mythology does.
And Napoleon knew that people don't follow the truth, they follow the story that makes them feel part of something greater. The modern wealthy have perfected this art form. They flood social media with their morning routines and productivity hacks, creating a simulation of transparency. They speak at universities, telling students that anything is possible, that the system rewards merit. Meanwhile, their children attend $60,000 per year private schools, intern at companies where dad plays golf with the CEO, and inherit wealth that compounds across generations through tax structures you're not even aware exist. The genius isn't in hiding their advantages. It's in displaying them as rewards for virtue rather than accidents of birth. They've convinced you that their yacht represents hard work rather than historical wealth accumulation. That their political influence comes from superior ideas rather than superior bank accounts. That the gap between you and them is merely effort, not an entire architecture of systemic privilege. And the most cruel part? They make you feel like your failure to achieve their level is a personal deficiency, not a design feature of a system built to produce exactly this outcome. You see the door. You see them waving from the other side. What you don't see is that it's painted on a wall.
Law 2. The iron fist must always wear the velvet glove. Machiavelli asked the eternal question, is it better to be loved or feared? His answer shocked the comfortable. Fear is more reliable. Love is fickle, dependent on the goodwill of others. But fear? Fear is a chain you forge yourself and willingly place around your own neck. And the wealthy have discovered something even more insidious. Make people fear losing what they have, and they'll police themselves more effectively than any tyrant ever could. You wake up, and before your eyes fully open, fear has already wrapped its fingers around your throat. The mortgage payment, the student loans with interest rates that make medieval usury look generous. The health insurance that might, if you're lucky, cover half of a catastrophe. The job that barely pays enough but fires you if you show weakness. You're terrified every single day. But here's the trick. You don't blame the system that created this precarity. You blame yourself for not being resilient enough to thrive within it. In Saladin's 12th century court, the great military leader understood that lasting power required more than military might. After reconquering Jerusalem, he could have massacred the Crusaders as they had massacred Muslims decades before. Instead, he showed mercy, allowed safe passage, became known for his honor. Why? Because he understood that fear mixed with respect creates loyalty that pure terror never could. Absolute brutality breeds desperate rebellion, but measured power, power that could destroy you but chooses not to, creates something more useful, voluntary submission. The modern wealthy have refined this to perfection. They don't need whips and chains. They've built an economic system where you chain yourself. They've created a world where healthcare is tied to employment, where education requires decades of debt, where housing costs consume half your income. You're not free to quit, to risk, to truly challenge the system because the fall would destroy you. And they call this freedom. They call this opportunity. Look at how quickly protests dissolve, not through police violence, though that happens, but through the protesters' own fear of losing their jobs, their credit scores, their tenuous hold on stability. The wealthy don't need to crack down when the system itself does the work for them. You silence yourself. You moderate your demands. You accept smaller and smaller slices of the pie because you're terrified that speaking up will leave you with nothing. The tech billionaire doesn't threaten his employees with dungeon cells. He simply ensures that their stock options require 4 years of loyalty, that their health insurance disappears the moment they leave, that the job market is flooded with desperate candidates who'll work for less.
The fear is ambient, invisible, constant, and it's far more effective than any visible tyrant could ever be. You're not being oppressed, you're being managed. And the bars of your cage, you maintain them yourself, convinced it's for your own good.
Law 3. Control the mirror in which society sees itself, and you control reality. In 1794, Maximilien Robespierre discovered too late what every fallen tyrant learns. When you lose control of your image, you lose control of your life. The man who sent thousands to the guillotine in the name of revolutionary virtue found himself on the same blood-soaked platform, branded a monster by the very people he claimed to liberate. His crime wasn't his actions. Many who came after him were equally brutal. His crime was losing the narrative. The wealthy today make no such mistakes. They've built empires not of stone and steel, but of perception and reputation. They've discovered that it doesn't matter what you do, only what people believe you did. And in an age of infinite media, the truth is whatever repeats loudest. Consider the pharmaceutical CEO who raises the price of life-saving medicine by 5,000%. In a just world, he'd be reviled, prosecuted, made an example of. But watch what happens. Within weeks, profiles appear in business magazines praising his disruptive thinking. He's invited to speak at conferences about innovation. His company's stock soars. Investors call him a genius. He donates a fraction of his windfall to charity and is photographed with grateful orphans. The narrative shifts from villain to misunderstood visionary. Reality didn't change, the mirror did. Or examine the tech billionaire who crushes small businesses, extracts data from billions without consent, facilitates the spread of hatred and misinformation. But he's also photographed wearing casual hoodies, speaking softly about connecting the world, funding clean energy initiatives. His PR team ensures every search of his name surfaces carefully curated content. The algorithm, which he controls, shows you what he wants you to see. You think you're forming your own opinion. You're not. You're experiencing managed reality. Napoleon's propaganda machine was crude by comparison. Paintings, pamphlets, controlled newspapers. Today's wealthy have sophisticated tools that would make the little corporal weep with envy. They own media empires that shape public discourse. They fund think tanks that produce studies with predetermined conclusions. They employ armies of social media managers who flood every platform with their preferred narrative. When a scandal erupts, they don't just deny it, they bury it under a wave of counter-narratives, distractions, and ultimately what they call their truth. Ibn Khaldun observed that rulers maintain power through asabiya, social cohesion based on shared narrative. The wealthy have weaponized this insight. They've created a narrative where they're not hoarders of resources, but job creators. Not tax avoiders, but efficient capital allocators. Not exploiters, but innovators. They've convinced entire populations to adopt their language, their frameworks, their way of seeing the world. And the most brilliant part? They've made criticism of their image seem like jealousy, ignorance, or bitterness. Question their narrative, and you're labeled a conspiracy theorist or someone who doesn't understand economics. They've fortified their reputation with your own self-doubt. The mirror they control doesn't just reflect, it transforms, and you see exactly what they need you to see. Law 4. Information is the ultimate wealth, and secrets are the bonds that build empires. In the 16th century, the Rothschild banking family established an empire that would span continents and survive revolutions. Their secret? A private courier network faster than any government's, carrying financial intelligence across Europe before anyone else knew what was happening. Legend says Nathan Rothschild learned of Napoleon's defeat at Waterloo a full day before the British government. While others operated on yesterday's news, he traded on tomorrow's certainty.
Information turned into gold, and gold into power that persists generations later. Today, the principle remains unchanged. Only the methods have evolved beyond Machiavelli's wildest imagination. The wealthy don't just have more money, they have more information. Better information, earlier information, and they've built walls around it that you'll never breach. Walk into any hedge fund, any venture capital firm, any boardroom where actual wealth is generated, and you'll find the same pattern. Decisions made on intelligence unavailable to the public. They call it market research or proprietary analysis, but it's the same ancient game, knowing what others don't, acting while others hesitate, profiting from asymmetry. Consider how the rich always seem to buy real estate in neighborhoods about to boom, invest in companies about to explode, pull out of markets about to crash. Is it genius? Luck? No, it's access. They sit on boards together. They golf at the same clubs. They send their children to the same schools where tomorrow's information is traded over cocktails and casual conversations. By the time you read about an opportunity in the news, they've already extracted every drop of profit from it. Sun Tzu wrote, "If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles." The wealthy have taken this principle and turned it into a systematic advantage. They know everything about you, your spending habits, your fears, your desires, your weaknesses. Data mining operations, credit reports, social media analytics, purchasing histories. They can predict your behavior better than you can predict it yourself. Meanwhile, their own financial dealings hide behind shell corporations, offshore accounts, armies of lawyers wielding non-disclosure agreements like weapons. But here's the darker aspect of Law 4. Secrets aren't just about information, they're about control. Every powerful person knows something about someone else, a scandal buried, a favor owed, a moment of weakness captured. This creates invisible networks of mutual leverage. You wonder why politicians never truly challenge the ultra-wealthy, why regulators seem toothless against obvious corruption. Because everyone who reaches certain heights has secrets that can be weaponized. The system protects itself through mutual assured destruction. And what secrets do you hold? What information do you possess that gives you leverage? Likely none that matter in the corridors where real power resides. You're transparent, predictable, knowable. They're opaque, surprising, mysterious. In the economy of power, you're poor not just in wealth, but in the currency that creates it. Exclusive, actionable, weaponizable, information. And that poverty is by design.
Law 5. Build structures that outlive you, and your power becomes eternal. Alexander the Great wept, they say, when he realized there were no more worlds to conquer. But his empire crumbled within a generation of his death. His power was tied to his person, his charisma, his military genius. When he died at 32, everything he built fractured into warring kingdoms. Raw power, no matter how magnificent, dies with its wielder. The truly wealthy learned long ago what Alexander never understood. Immortality doesn't come from conquest. It comes from creating systems, institutions, structures that perpetuate your will long after your heart stops beating. The great families, the Medicis, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, they didn't just accumulate wealth. They built machines that generate wealth automatically, generation after generation, immune to the mortality that claims individual ambition. Look at Carnegie, Rockefeller, Morgan. Dead for over a century, yet their power persists. Not through their personal achievements, but through the foundations they established, the institutions they funded, the economic structures they embedded into the fabric of society. Carnegie's libraries still shape which knowledge is accessible. Rockefeller's foundations still influence global health policy. Morgan's banking systems still undergird international finance.
These men achieved what pharaohs dreamed of. They turned their will into permanent reality. Ibn Khaldun would recognize this as the ultimate expression of civilization building. He observed that dynasties that merely rule eventually fall, but those that institutionalize their authority, that embed their values into law and custom, achieve a kind of immortality. They transcend the cycle of rise and fall by becoming the cycle itself. The modern ultra-wealthy have perfected this art to a degree that would astonish their predecessors. They don't just pass down money. Money evaporates through taxation and poor management. They pass down trusts, foundations, corporations, political influence, networks of power that regenerate wealth automatically. They've lobbied for tax structures that favor inherited wealth, legal frameworks that protect dynastic accumulation, educational institutions that train each generation's elite to preserve the hierarchy. Look at the billionaire who establishes a charitable foundation. Noble, right? Except that foundation allows him to avoid billions in taxes while maintaining control over how that money influences society. His descendants sit on the board in perpetuity. The foundation funds think tanks that promote policies benefiting the wealthy, universities that teach economics favorable to inherited privilege, media outlets that shape public opinion. Long after he's dust, his worldview continues to shape reality. Even more insidious, they've created systems that make you complicit in perpetuating their power. Your retirement fund invested in their corporations. Your 401k dependent on their stock prices staying high. Your job connected to economic structures they control. You can't tear down their systems without hurting yourself. They've made themselves indispensable. This is power that transcends mortality, not the crude immortality of statues and monuments that can be torn down, but the invisible immortality of systems so embedded that removing them seems impossible, even insane. They die. Their power doesn't.
Law 6. Keep your friends close and your enemies convinced they're your friends. In the blood-soaked politics of Renaissance Florence, the Medici family mastered an art form that separated them from every rival who found themselves face down in the Arno River. They made their enemies want to serve them. Not through fear alone, though they had plenty to distribute. Not through love, though they bought that too. Through the delicate manipulation of interest, ambition, and the illusion of mutual benefit. Lorenzo de' Medici, Il Magnifico, didn't defeat his rivals by crushing them. He absorbed them. He identified what each person wanted: power, prestige, wealth, protection, and offered it in measured doses, always ensuring that their success remained tied to his continued goodwill. A rival banker became a business partner. An enemy family married into his network. A political opponent received a lucrative position that neutralized his threat. Everyone around Lorenzo prospered, but they prospered through him, never despite him. He didn't eliminate competition. He franchised it. Machiavelli observed this closely and codified the principle. The prince should make others powerful, but ensure their power flows from him. The wealthy today have taken this to levels of sophistication that would make Lorenzo dizzy with admiration. Look at how tech billionaires interact with their supposed competitors. In public, they're rivals, fighting for market share, innovation supremacy. But examine their boards of directors, their venture capital investments, their private communications, and you find an entirely different picture. They invest in each other's companies, they share board members, they coordinate on policy lobbying. When government threatens regulation, competitors suddenly become allies, presenting a unified front. When threatened by true outsiders, they collaborate to crush the threat before returning to their theatrical competition. The wealthy have learned to turn potential enemies into dependent allies through strategic generosity. The politician who might regulate them receives campaign donations, speaking fees, promises of lucrative positions after public service. The journalist who might expose them gets exclusive interviews, off-the-record insights that make their career, subtle suggestions of what happens to those who betray trust.
The competitor who might disrupt them receives investment, board positions, partnership deals that neutralize their threat while appearing magnanimously. Sun Tzu taught, the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. The wealthy have perfected this. They don't battle their enemies, they recruit them. They create situations where opposing them becomes more costly than joining them, where betrayal seems foolish compared to cooperation, where the smart move, the career-advancing move, is always alignment with existing power. Even their philanthropy serves this function. By funding universities, think tanks, media organizations, they create entire networks of people whose livelihoods depend on wealthy benevolence. These people don't feel controlled, they feel grateful. They defend their benefactors not because they're forced to, but because their interests have been perfectly aligned. You think you see competition at the top? What you're witnessing is coordinated theater, a performance designed to convince you that the game is fair while they've already divided the board among themselves. Every king needs a court. The brilliant ones make the court believe it chose to be there.
Law 7. The masses think in quarters, the powerful think in centuries. There's a reason you're always one emergency away from financial catastrophe while dynastic wealth compounds through generations. It's not intelligence, it's not work ethic, it's time horizon. You're playing checkers on a board where they're playing chess across decades, and you don't even realize you're in different games. The wealthy think in dynasties, in legacy, in structures that will benefit their great-grandchildren. You think in months, maybe years if you're fortunate. This gap isn't just about resources, it's about fundamentally different relationships with time itself. And this difference is what separates temporary comfort from permanent power. In 14th century Egypt, the Mamluk sultans understood this principle. They built not just for their reign, but for the continuity of their class. They established waqfs, charitable endowments that would generate wealth in perpetuity, supporting their descendants and allies centuries beyond their deaths. These weren't acts of pure generosity. They were time machines, projecting power forward through the generations. Ibn Khaldun identified the pattern. Civilizations that plan beyond immediate needs survive the storms that destroy their neighbors. Those that consume everything now, that think only of present satisfaction, collapse when inevitable challenges arise. The wealthy have internalized this lesson so deeply it's become instinct. Consider how they structure their investments. You put money in a savings account earning 2% interest, if you're lucky. They create trust funds that compound over 50 years, structured to minimize every tax, maximize every return, grow automatically through market movements they helped engineer. Your financial advisor talks about retirement at 65. Their wealth managers talk about family offices that will function for 300 years. Look at how they buy assets. You buy a car that depreciates the moment you drive it off the lot. They buy land, art, companies, political influence, things that appreciate across decades. You think about quarterly expenses. They think about what neighborhoods will be valuable in 2075, what industries will dominate in 2050, what political changes will reshape society in 2040. By the time you hear about an opportunity, they've already positioned themselves for the aftermath. Napoleon, despite his tactical genius, failed to truly master this law. He thought in campaigns, in victories, in his personal glory. He built an empire that couldn't outlive his ambition. The families that financed his wars, the Rothschilds, the Barings, they understood time differently. They knew Napoleon would eventually fall, so they positioned themselves to profit from both his rise and his collapse, to be indispensable to whoever came after, to play the long game while the emperor chased glory. The education system you attended, the one that taught you to think in semesters and quarters and fiscal years, who designed that? Who benefits from a population that can't think beyond their next paycheck?
that can't coordinate long-term collective action because everyone's too focused on immediate survival. You're locked in the present, scrambling for today. They own tomorrow. They've already purchased it, shaped it, structured it to guarantee their continued dominance. Time isn't neutral. It's a weapon, and they've mastered it while you're still figuring out next month's rent.
You've journeyed through the hidden machinery of power. You've seen behind the curtains where reality is manufactured. You understand now that the world you thought you knew is a carefully constructed stage, every piece positioned to maintain ancient hierarchies under modern disguises. But understanding is only the first step. Knowledge without action is just entertainment. Machiavelli wrote The Prince not as an instruction manual for tyrants, but as a warning to citizens. He pulled back the curtain so that those without power might finally see how it operates, might stop being moved like pieces on a board they never knew existed. His book was burned. He died in disgrace, but his words survived because truth, once spoken, becomes impossible to completely silence. The 7 laws you've learned today aren't secrets because no one knows them. They're secrets because no one dares speak them plainly. The illusion of accessibility, the subtle architecture of fear, the manipulation of image and narrative, the weaponization of information, the creation of eternal systems, the orchestration of apparent allies and enemies, the mastery of time itself. These principles have governed human civilization for millennia. They will continue to govern it tomorrow unless something changes. And what changes it? You might hope for revolution, for some dramatic collapse of the existing order. But history shows that violent upheavals usually just shuffle the deck without changing the game. The French Revolution devoured its own children and produced Napoleon. The Russian Revolution traded czars for commissars. The hungry generation that overthrows the old elite simply becomes the new elite, forgetting where they came from within 3 generations, exactly as Ibn Khaldun predicted. Real change comes from consciousness, from enough people understanding the game that it becomes impossible to play, from communities that reject the narratives fed to them and build alternative structures, from individuals who choose to measure success by something other than their proximity to power, from the moment you stop defending a system that was never designed to serve you. The wealthy lie because they must. Their power depends on your acceptance of their reality. The moment you withdraw that acceptance, the moment you see through the mechanisms of manipulation, you become dangerous. Not because you'll storm their gates, they've prepared for that, but because immunity to their illusions is contagious. One person who truly sees, truly understands, can wake others. And consciousness spreads faster than any army can march. So here's your choice, the only one that truly matters. Do you return to comfortable illusion? Do you let this knowledge fade, absorbed back into the daily grind, another interesting video that changed nothing? Or do you carry this forward? Do you question every narrative, examine every assumption, challenge every system that asks for your blind faith? If you've made it this far, you're not like the others. You've proven you can handle uncomfortable truth. So prove it again. Subscribe to this channel. Join the secret circle of those who refuse to be played. Share this with one person who's ready to wake up. The door is open, but only you can choose to walk through.